Yeah.
We're back in session. Get ready for our next presentation from Bowman Murray, is that correct? Yeah, him and I was amazed when I saw the lady sitting out there earlier, and I said, you know, like you said, is it a sister or what? That's what we said this morning. But anyway, we have the advantage of you guys, so we know who you are, but you don't know who we are. I'm Bill Pate, and I'm going to start on my left so you know who you're talking to while you're making your presentation.
I'm Kent Yelverton. I'm Director of Property and Construction for the North Carolina Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. We're a partner with Wayne County on this project.
I'm Eddie Pitzer, and I'm with a nonprofit here in Goldsboro, the Wayne County Livestock Development Association.
Julian Aycock, a farmer in the county.
I'm Greg Shackelford, a regional executive with Southern Bank in Mount Olive.
Kevin Johnson, County Extension Director.
Thank you, gentlemen. So you understand the process, we'll allow you to give your presentation, and most of the way we will wait to the end to ask our questions and, you know, and save time. But if anybody has a burning question, you can obviously speak up and ask. And what we're going to do is, I don't know if we'll be able to finish it today. We're ranking the presentations and what we think, and we'll turn that over to Ms. Woods, and she'll total the score, and then that'll be the selection of the firm that wins the contract. So that's how we're going to operate. So it's all yours.
Thank you. My name is John Murray. I'm with Bowman Murray Hemingway Architects, and thank you for having us here. It's an honor to be able to make this presentation. I've got some of my team members with me here today, and just working from my left, Jim Benson, Duncan McFadden. Jim's a mechanical engineer, Duncan's an electrical engineer, and Chris Hilt, who's I think may have interviewed a little earlier, is our civil engineer and landscape architect. I want to tell you a little bit about our firm. We are based in Wilmington. Wilmington is our only office. We have about 15 staff members. I have two other partners, Bruce Bowman and Chip Hemingway. Our firm's been in business for 59 years. We are the second generation of owners. We took ownership of this firm probably about 15 years ago. We started there when the senior principals were in their mid-60s, and we were in our late 20s, and it was the firm has always really specialized in architectural services to the public sector, and that's the way we were trained. Our projects are diverse, and some of these are a testament to that. Southeastern Agricultural and Lumberton's in the bottom, but we've also worked in all the aquariums in the state. We've worked in Jeanette's Pier, which was recently rebuilt at the Outer Banks, if you've been there. The team, we put our teams together that we feel are best suited for the particular project, and the team that we've assembled for this project is really a team that's handled many of our agricultural projects in the past. We have CLH Design, Chris Hilt, for both civil engineer and landscape, and Don Woods, who is a local structural engineer in Wilmington. It's our structural engineer, McFadden Engineers for electrical, MCBH for plumbing and mechanical. Big Sky Design for interiors. She's also based in Wilmington. And we use a professional cost estimator. I'm going to talk about this in a little bit more detail as we move through the presentation, but cost estimating is particularly important, and we do it at least 3 times through the course of the project. It's one of the best ways to make sure that your expectations are met, and we deliver the kind of product and bid day that you're expecting. This is just a map of North Carolina that's showing a few of the locations we've worked on projects that are agriculture related. We're highlighting the Southeastern Agricultural Event Center in Lumberton, Brit Agricultural Service Center in Kenansville, Southeastern Agricultural Tech in Whiteville. And this is some preliminary planning, wasn't constructed. Wilson County Event Center, Dublin County Event Center in Kenansville, and some projects at Murphy Farms in Wallace. Our practice generally is from the ocean to 95 and north all the way to Virginia. We sometimes venture west of 95, but it's rare. This is a photograph of the relatively recently completed project in Lumberton, Southeastern Agricultural Event Center. Although I live in Wilmington now, I grew up in Lumberton. This is a pretty important project for Lumberton in that community, and it's been pretty well received. This is a shot of a classroom building at Southeastern Community College where they we're working on some different aspects of agriculture and agricultural technology. This is one of 4 master plans we developed for Wilson County. This is a large covered arena that was open air, and then there was a large indoor arena that had a variety of activities. It was somewhat similar to the arena in Dublin, but it was a little bit larger. One of the things we would do if we were given this project is look at several site options. So you would be looking at something like this and maybe 4 or 5 variations to help you decide which one was best suited for the project. And this is a shot of the front of the Dublin County Event Center. I think that has fixed seating for 1,800. I think we can seat another 1,200 or 1,300 on the floor of that facility. Next shot is the Brit Agricultural Service Center. Of all the buildings I'm showing you, programmatically, that one's probably the most similar to the project that we are interviewing for today, and I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about that in just a minute or so. I'm going to get into specifics of your project and kind of want to tell you how we go through the design process. In some respects, a lot of the things that we generally do, you've gotten a jump on with the plan that you've developed. But what we would propose is reviewing the information from the updated 2013 facility programming report and look at the cost estimate and just see if what we see is in line with the work that was done by your consultant. We often do additional research. We visit similar facilities. I think this has been done by many of you already. We perform site studies. We work on building programming, which eventually works into the bubble diagrams that were included in your report. And then we provide a cost analysis. So our first step, instead of really starting from scratch, we've got the document's a really good document. We've got a great starting point to take that information, evaluate it, talk to you about what we see as the good and the bad and the things that may need to be evaluated a little bit further before we finalize it, and then work towards finalizing the program and working towards schematic design. Eventually, we would work through floor plans and elevations, and we would provide 3-dimensional models of what the building would look like from the outside. And we would bring in our cost estimator who would help us kind of fine-tune the cost estimate based on the 3D models, the site plans, programming information. And then we would come back to you and talk to you about that and make sure we're on track and the budget's meeting your expectations and the building is too. There's a really good chance to kind of refine things and make adjustments as we move forward. We'd have 2 more big cost estimating sessions at design development, which is about midway through construction documents, and then immediately prior to bid at the conclusion of construction documents. We'll talk about the building a little bit, or what we gathered from the review of the planning document. 5 agricultural agencies, Cooperative Extension, Cherry Farm Administration, Center for Environmental Farming Systems, Farm Service, NRCS Soil and Water Conservation, and then some parts of it that are really supportive of those, including some storage areas, and then a large assembly area and some classrooms, and then some support areas for that as well. And then the site, we had demonstration areas, greenhouse, open pavilion, screen pavilion. And we reviewed some of the programmatic designs and looked at the 1- and the 2-story scheme. My personal opinion is that the recommendations you got from your consultant for the 2-story scheme are definitely going to be the most economical, but we'll talk about that in just a bit. And I'm going to turn this over to Chris Hilt just to talk about some of the site considerations and a couple of things we think are really important during the course of design, and I'll follow up after her.
Thanks a lot, John. I too think that a very thorough study has been done, and we kind of want to talk a little bit more about how we would take advantage of the study that's been done and take it a step farther. We do identify that those farm ditches are located to the north of the property and how important that view from Old Smithfield Road is. We think it's very important to maintain some of the rural character of this area, so I think in terms of the placement of the parking and adjacencies, we're going to look very closely at that. We're also going to show you a lot of different concepts, some that are going to show a lot more of the parking stepping down the hill from a stormwater management standpoint. And one thing that's very important is you're investing a lot in this building. You've already seen some beautiful architecture. We want to make sure it's not welcome to the parking lot and, oh, there's a building back there somewhere. Best practices, this is very important to us. We want to look at how we can demonstrate on this site organic farming, alternative energy, possibly, looking at economically beneficial partnerships. As North Carolina changes, and we've all heard farm to table, probably too much. But if you look at some of the communities around us, Kinston's a great example of those relationships between farmers and directly with the restaurants and with the schools. Those are things we want to talk to and demonstrate on this site. We also want to look at things that can we express as something as simple as bee management. All these different things that are very, very critical to agriculture in North Carolina and to the USDA, and how can we express this on this site and make it fun for kids, make it fun for people who probably haven't experienced this before. And do I forward it? Right there. This is an example of a site that we are actually taking a lot of that agriculture history and applying it to the future. This is the community of Knightdale, and this is downtown Knightdale, 75-acre facility. This is Knightdale Station Park. We worked very hard with Knightdale. They wanted to harken back to their history of being agricultural rail town. And so we worked very hard with the farm-like structures up along the main street of Knightdale, that they're going to have all kinds of outdoor events. And we also looked, it's hard to see here, and I'm not sure you'll see it with the pointer. Yeah, it's hard to see, but we're actually designing a tower, and it will mimic a water tower that a local stained glass artist is going to design so that we get the community involved, and once again, economical benefits and being able to celebrate the community. And this is Raven Rock State Park. We actually designed both cliffs of the new state park, which you may be familiar with, that visitor center, and also Raven Rock. Both of those facilities, it was very important for us to express what those facilities are about before you even get through the front door. If you've been to Cliffs of the Neuse, we actually have the Neuse River laid out in the sidewalk as you enter the site. Exhibit space is very important to us. We have also worked on all three of the aquariums in North Carolina and for the zoo. So we are landscape architects and civil engineers who take exhibit space to the site. And we feel like that's very important for this project, for us to be able to express what you do and how you collaborate before anyone even goes through the front door.
Thanks. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this project and what I've observed from the architectural side. And to me, one of the greatest attributes for this project is also the same thing that's going to be one of your greatest challenges, and that's that site. If you walk to the top of that site and you look out beyond, I mean, it's beautiful. It's great looking. But you've also got a huge level change, probably close to 40 feet towards the back, but easily, close to 20 towards the front. So, some of the things that Chris and I, if we were selected, would be working through is, I wouldn't want a building that's set back so far that it drops off the site and you don't have a strong street presence and it doesn't make a statement about what kind of building it is. But you really don't have room to push it all up to the front without huge cost with cut and fill and moving dirt around. So, how do you balance those two? And I think those are the kind of things we need to look at, the different things we can do with parking and the different things that we can do with the buildings and different configurations of the first and second story. One of the other things that's going to be a challenge is building circulation. You've got at least 5 different agencies, so it's easy when you've got that many offices and that many different groups to kind of get lost in a maze. I'm sure you've all been through buildings where that's happened and it's uncomfortable and it's not really a pleasant experience. You can design these things so that doesn't happen. So you've got clear points of circulation. So you go to individual reception areas and you cluster these receptions closer together so you're not traveling great distances to get to the different agencies. I'm going to show you an example. This building isn't as big as what you're proposing, but some of the same concepts are shown. You're going to have a lot of things going on with public versus private because agricultural isn't like banking, and it's really not like architecture. There's messy components. There's stuff that's got to be washed and cleaned and clothes changed and trucks washed, and there's just a bunch of stuff that goes on, and there's also a huge amount of things that are just going to be moved around. Cooperative Extension's got a lot of exhibit stuff that goes around all over the county. There's just a lot of movement of different things, and when you look at what you're planning for your auditorium, If you are doing a 500-seat auditorium, that's a lot of seats. That's so many seats that you've got to really have an organized way of moving those seats around and setting them up and looking at furniture systems, where the chairs are stacked into the carrels and you have adequate storage space for them, and you plan for all of that so it's less of a burden on your staff. I mentioned wayfinding without signs. I think if you handle your circulation in the best way that you can, that the signage really is secondary. It tells you where you are, but you're not having to look at the signage to figure out where to go, and that would be our goal. This facility, I anticipate, could grow, particularly with the emphasis it's got on the environmental emphasis in farming and the way I see the industry changing. So we've got to make adequate space for future growth, and we've got to think about that and how those things will be connected and what they probably will be. So for most of our larger clients, like the university, the community college, we would look out 20 years and we would plan what we think is a probable scenario, and we would make sure that what we're doing now doesn't inhibit future growth. So that's a really important component for site. Energy efficiency, to tell you the truth, the state has got such a strict energy code now. This building's going to be energy efficient no matter what. But there's some really cool new technologies that are out, especially on the mechanical side, that I want Jim to talk about a little bit. Daylighting, I like the use of daylighting, and there's also some things now you can do with integration of your lights and daylighting, so you don't have them both on at the same time. I think Duncan can talk about that a little bit. Durable finishes and materials, that goes without saying, and then storage. Storage is going to be a really big concern for this facility, for the auditorium, for all those spaces. In the preliminary planning I saw, a lot of the storage is in the lower level, and the two-story scheme pushed back against where there would be soil, and that's a good place. There's no windows over there. That's a logical place. That's probably where it's going to be if you utilize the two-story scheme. But that needs to be really well thought out, and not just where the storage is, but accessibility to storage to get things back outside if they've got to be carried to another location. This is a project. This is Brit Agricultural. This is the one I said was somewhat similar to what you're proposing because some of the agencies are close. So we had, in this case, farm service up front, soil and water conservation behind, cooperative extension here. It's hard to see with this pointer. And then we had a much smaller meeting room than what you proposed, seating for about 240 with chairs. But you can see kind of this has got some of the well. If you look at the blue area where the entry is, that's a central circulation spine. And in the case of Dublin County, they wanted that lobby and the columns in that lobby to replicate some of the historical columns they had that were used through the agricultural buildings throughout Dublin County, which are kind of unique. And so that's kind of where we got our a lot of our design elements in that lobby. In each of those spaces, the green, the purple, and the yellow has each got a reception area that's directly off that central spine. The other thing that's really important is a separate entry for that meeting room, which I'm sure you're going to want to do the same thing, and the ability to shut off the bathrooms in that meeting room independently of the rest of the facility so it can operate independently. That's really important. So those are, and then if you look in the back, and it's hard to see at this scale, but there's stairs, there's storage. A lot of the storage needed to be moved out for cooperative extension was back there, but there's also lockers, showers, a lot of the dirty areas, a place to wash, I don't have the site plan, but a place to wash down trucks, and generally just, the stuff that we really didn't want in the front of the building is all kind of purposely moved towards the rear. Green components, architecture's kind of moving the way that agricultural is, so everybody wants grown locally, and there's been a renewed interest in picking regional materials. So if we're doing a project in Wayne County, we might not necessarily have stone from the North Carolina mountains. We'd be picking things that are more native to this area, more appropriate for this county. There's some simple things you can do, and if you look at that upper right, that's a project we're working on for National Audubon in the Outer Banks. If we were given this project, one of the things we do is we model this building, but we can show you a movie where we can take any time of day, any day of the year, and we can show you the projections of the sunlight in these buildings, and we can work that into our building energy model. We can show you exactly what this thing's going to look like, at 12 o'clock noon, December the 25th of 2015. So there's some really cool stuff we can do to show you what the results of a different building orientation are. We've been using a lot of recycled materials. We've been minimizing impervious surfaces. I know Chris has been doing that. In the coastal area where a lot of our projects are, that's of particular importance. We're required to do that in many cases. Same thing with rainwater collection. We're going to talk about, Jim's going to talk about geothermal as an option, and it is an option, and also solar and LED lighting, which has probably seen one of the greatest changes over the past 5 years. LED used to be totally unaffordable. Now we're seeing it fairly commonly in high bay areas where we don't have to get a lift, to go up and change these bulbs often, but we're starting to see it even more often. And that photograph to the left is really one of the state's few LEED Platinum projects, and that's there's probably only a handful in the state. That's a replacement for Jeanette's Pier, and that's approximately 15,000 square foot pier house. But that project has got a lot of green elements. It's got wind turbines. It has solar panels, gray water reuse, and interestingly enough, all the support for that building is actually in shore, and everything's kind of pumped back and forth because we couldn't place it over the water. I'm going to flip this over to mechanical considerations and give Jim a chance to talk a little bit.
Well, mechanical stuff is not pretty, and nobody wants to see it or whatever. But we are trying to keep the building comfortable, and energy efficient is one of the toughest things we seem to do. We've been doing a lot with the geothermal systems of late. There's some newer things. It's somewhat expensive to do in these days, but there's some hybrid systems out there that are gaining some traction, and we're doing some things with that. You have the more conventional chiller and boiler systems, 4-pipe and 2-pipe. And then the other one that's listed here on the slide is the VRF system. That's variable refrigerant flow. We're seeing a lot of those. Those are kind of the little ceiling ductless units. You don't run a bunch of ductwork. You can basically hang a lot of little ceiling units and wall units, and it gives you a lot of individual control with very, very good efficiency on those. So that's one of the things we're looking at. And one of the things I always say in air conditioning, we spend most of our time dealing with compromises because the cost of systems and convenience and zoning and trying to get the ultimate comfort. If you got an unlimited budget, we can make everything perfectly comfortable, but it's not that way. So what we have to do is try and make intelligent compromises on how to zone your systems, and certainly in like the buildings that John was showing you up in Kenansville, we had zones for different areas. Your meeting spaces have their own thermostats, and we try and as much as we can give as much control as we can. There are challenges in air distribution, whether you're dealing with large and small spaces, different ways to handle that. And comfort control in large spaces where you have multiple uses, being able to try and split things up. And the other thing we get in now is control systems are getting very, very sophisticated and complex with computers. And the more complexity you get into it, the more potential you do have for trying to keep everything working right. And we can get the most energy efficiency out of that, but it is understand that there's maintenance and other things involved, and we try and strike a balance to be able, we can give you systems that you can maintain and look after and give you the energy efficiency and all of that as well. Try as much as we can for the users to give you simple controls, thermostats on the walls that may have a lot of smart stuff going on behind the scenes. That we do a lot with remote access now, where your service folks and county maintenance folks can remote into the systems and look at them and be able to do a lot of troubleshooting without having to go to the site or to the individual thing, see a lot what's going on. And then the other real thing that we deal with a lot in our area is humidity control. With the new codes, we're having to be very energy efficient, but at the same time there's some very strict ventilation, trying to keep plenty of fresh air coming into the buildings. And in our climate, that's introducing a lot of humidity, and those systems provide a lot of a challenge as far as design and how to mitigate that as much as we can. We do, various kinds of controls on occupancy to try and limit the amount of ventilation to only when you need it. So there's a lot of things with the energy that we do, and hopefully when we get done with it, if we do our job well in the air conditioning business, you don't know it's there, and everybody's happy and everybody's comfortable, and that's what we're shooting for.
I get to push a button.
Oh, you get to push the
Which button do I push? Top one? You would think the electrical engineer would know how to do that. I'm Duncan McFadden with McFadden Engineers in Wilmington. John didn't say it, but John and Jim and I worked probably on, or his firm and John and I and Jim have worked on probably every job he showed you up there. We've been working together for many years, much older than we all look. I've been doing this for approaching 40 years now. We do the electrical portion of the design, which includes power distribution, fire alarm, lighting, data, and so forth. We probably don't have quite as much opportunity for energy savings as the mechanical systems do, but lighting is a big deal with us. We enjoy doing lighting design. Always have, and this day and age there's a tremendous opportunity for lighting energy savings and controllability. Everybody's heard the LED song, I guess you could say, with Cree right up the road in Raleigh and RTP, but LED is taking over the lighting industry, which is a huge industry in itself. But this type of building really lends itself to LED lighting and the controllability of it, which really you couldn't do prior to LED as inexpensively as you can do with LED now. Typically, these buildings with the large volumes are done with metal halide or high pressure sodium fixtures, or lamps and fixtures, which are difficult to control and expensive to control, and they don't have a long service life. You end up replacing lamps frequently, and they're difficult to keep clean. LED sources that have come along in the last 5 years or so have really opened up what we can do with lighting. We can individually address every fixture and control it individually from the whole group. So there's opportunities to save energy if you don't need the whole system on, or you just need one piece of it on, or the front of it on, the back of it dimmed down. It's very easy to do and relatively inexpensive to do. Obviously, there's a big opportunity with the maintenance of LED fixtures because of the life. We really don't know what the true life of LED is because it hadn't been in service that long, but IES, the Illuminating Engineering Society, has set some standards, and a lot of these sources will go 70 to 100,000 hours, which is a pretty long period compared to the older technology, which was 10 to 15,000 hours. So you don't have to get a forklift or a man lift and get out there and replace these lamps every year or two. They're instant on, instant off. You don't have to worry about emergency lighting because of the restrike issues with metal halide. All that's gone away. But in a high bay area like the arena, it's great because of those attributes. There's a lot of office type, this type of lighting available in LED now. That's prices come down to where it's reasonable, and we're seeing, instead of 2x4 fixtures, similar to this is fluorescent, but there's similar fixtures to LED that on a life cycle cost basis will pay back in a couple of years. And we do a lot of life cycle cost analyses to prove the new technology, which is a little bit more expensive than customary technology, will pay for itself. We just redid a 80,000 square foot call center in Cincinnati, and we replaced about 750 fluorescent fixtures with about 550 LED fixtures, and the payback was 2 years. So and then after that, it's just gravy. Unfortunately, on some of the sustainable technology, being a public entity, you can't take the tax credits, which makes it a little more difficult to justify in some cases. But you still can take the Duke Energy credits if they're available. Obviously, we provide the distribution system for event power, for HVAC, and all the safety systems, emergency lighting and fire alarm and so forth. John touched on daylight harvesting and controllability with occupancy sensors. Daylight harvesting is very easy to do these days with LED, in that you just have some sensors that are on board the fixtures, and they watch the ambient in the space and dim down to keep the lighting level where you want it. So it's all automatic. And again, it's relatively inexpensive to do. Occupancy sensors are pretty much mandated by the State Energy Code, and we use those routinely. Solar, wind, we've done it both. It's expensive. It's not so bad if you can get the energy credits, the tax credits, but in your case, it wouldn't be tax credits involved, so it becomes more difficult. But the pier John showed you, Jeanette's Pier up at Nag's Head, has 310 kW wind turbines. It's done very well, and it's reduced their cost of energy, but it's difficult to apply on this type of project. Solar, photovoltaic, we have done and are doing on several projects. And there's possibility you could do something with that for an outbuilding or part of the roof if we've got a south-facing roof. But again, it's very expensive without the tax breaks. Thank you.
Thanks, Duncan. I've got another slide in here about the cost estimate, and I guess maybe I've talked about the cost estimate too much, but it's just so important to get it right the first time and to keep checking it as you move through the project. And this is our last slide. Why this team, and Duncan mentioned something that I probably should have earlier. This group of people has worked together for over 20 years, so this isn't a team that's assembled for this project. In some cases, you can find firms that have, there are large firms where maybe somebody will interview and then maybe somebody else will actually work on your project and somebody else might do administration. In our cases, every one of the principals here that you see today would be working on the project, in design, during the meetings, from the very beginning to the end. We're committed to communication. I think that's probably the most important aspect of how you deal with your client, and we put a great emphasis on it, and we talk often and meet often and make sure we're all on the same page. We're committed to working as a team. We're really not making decisions. If we do our job right, we're giving you good information to help you make the decisions for this project. All these firms are regional, and they're aware of regional issues, specifically humidity control, which has gotten to be a big issue with increased energy efficiency in HVAC systems. A lot of buildings aren't doing too well right now because of that. So we've dealt with these issues in the past. We know how to keep it from a problem from occurring. And we do have a fairly lengthy track record of agricultural type facilities, which are kind of unique in nature, and we're used to dealing with some of the same agencies that will be represented in your program. It would be an exciting project if we were able to work on it. It really would. And so with that, I'll just open up to questions. But again, thank you for having us here today.
Questions, gentlemen? I'll start off. I do have a question. You were talking about the geothermal. How maintenance friendly is that? I mean, does it, don't you have to drill wells and high pressure?
Well, there's a number of different ways it can be done. The full sort of closed loop geothermal, you drill a bunch of wells down into the ground, and they're using polyethylene pipe, and it's buried for 50 years, and you don't have to touch that. And then you have similar maintenance in the building to what you would have otherwise. because of that, that's actually, there can be less maintenance comparatively to some of the other systems that you have. Some of the hybrid systems use a cooling tower, and you've got water-based systems there, and there's water treatment and things you have to do with that, which adds to it. But all in all, if anything, the full geothermal systems really have the opportunity to be less maintenance, but it's an expensive proposition up front. And that's the biggest problem, is the upfront dollars to do it takes a lot of wells to do it that way. We have been doing some with open wells, where you basically, put a well in and take it out of the ground, and then if you can find a place to put that water that you use, you just use it directly. And that's a very efficient system and somewhat cheaper, but it's more challenged from an environmental standpoint on how do you deal with the water and where does it go, and there's discharge issues with that. So we haven't done a whole lot of those. On smaller projects, it's more viable than it is in the larger ones.
So since we don't get tax credits, probably not a real great idea for us.
I mean, you ought to look at it, certainly. I mean, the way I try and approach most of these projects is we kind of look at where you are and what you're trying to do, and come up with the best solution, that's within the budgetary restraints and gives you the most efficient system and the most comfortable system, and try and weigh in all of those things, because there's a lot of different ways we can do mechanical systems.
Okay. Thank you. I have another question. Switching gears, not for you. Well, you can answer it. You might answer it too. I don't know. But anyway, as you well know, that we're still seeking full funding for this project, and we're hoping to get some from the private sector as well. Do you have any promotional fundraising things that you could help us with, whether it be brochures, documents, digital things?
Absolutely. I mean, that's pretty common in our industry. Oftentimes we work through a schematic plan. You wouldn't take it all the way to construction documents. Yeah. You might just do work through the schematic plan, work on these 3D models and animations. We just Battleship North Carolina, we just started working on that project. We just finished a movie where they're flying around and they're getting ready to go through a similar process where they're trying to start private fundraising to make those repairs. So we do that sort of thing all the time.
Okay. That's all I got. Anybody else?
Bill, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
As y'all know, we realized this RFQ was a little convoluted because we haven't made up our minds yet about whether we're going to go design, bid, build, or design, build. And so we put in there about the design, build bridge. Have y'all had experience doing that?
I have, and you're going to be hard pressed to find. Well, you're interviewing a lot of good firms, so maybe somebody has, but it is so new. We're working on some projects for the National Guard. I just called up to Ryan Scruggs at SEO, and it's a new, SEO didn't even have the guidelines in place to even know how to implement it yet. So there's not a lot of, nobody knows what's happening. I'll tell you one part of it I really don't like. And so if you are the designer and you start, if you go design build, you have to leave the project.
Right. You become our consultant, right?
And your
quality of the materials, how I read the statute.
Yeah, and I'm a little concerned about that. I mean, personally, what I think part of our firm's strength and this team's strength is, you got the same guys from the first meeting and until you wrap the project up. So you got some institutional memory that's there at the project meetings and knows what's going on. I'd be afraid if you had the original designers drop out in a consultant role that there'd just be some stuff that fell through the gaps. So,
well, I wanted to bring that up and have that discussion because this group and ultimately the Board of Commissioners will have to make a decision before much longer on which method of service delivery we want to choose on it. But we did send out the RFQ both ways.
John, may I add one other thing?
Sure.
It's actually, there's been a lot of discussion and debate there's been a lot of discussion and debate in the AIA, North Carolina. And while I'm a landscape architect, I listen to it because 90% of my work is public. Mm-hmm. One of the other concerns is for the architect that takes over the project at that 35%. There is going to be a cost to the client because that architect, as good as your documents may be up to that 35%, you have another architect who's coming in and taking over the project at that point. So they're going to want to come in and do a lot of confirmations and verifications of the information. So I still question, and I know a lot of architects question the efficiency of that process.
Versus the traditional design bid build.
Yeah, versus the traditional. So that is one thing very much to consider in terms of the design fees that you'll be negotiating. Is that second architect is going to have to come back and do some verification. We are in public health, safety, and welfare profession. We have liability for anything that we receive from anyone else, let alone our own design. So definitely consider that in your decision.
You bring up a good point also is, since this is relatively new, some of these issues haven't been fleshed out.
Correct.
Do we get ownership and utilization of your preliminary design? Because we're basically handing it off, might be handing it off to someone else, and then they do, as you're saying, a lot of confirmations, but before they take it forward. So there's obviously, the law contemplates that would end up being our product, or at least we have a license to use it, just like we do with the standard project. So could y'all talk about that a little bit?
I think, and John, please, I'm pretty passionate about this too, but I think the other issue is going to be, and you never want a project to have any complications, but, you know, you have to look at arbitration, mediation, all those are the worst case scenarios, is that you get into a situation where you really are going to have that second architect agree to a contract that says he accepts everything that he receives in that first contract. If there is any question as to the validity of previous information that you've received to that 35% document, you are going to be in a arbitration mediation situation.
More complex legal environment.
Yes.
We've got three parties instead of
And
two.
I do see, and I hope I do not offend anyone in the room, but I do believe that attorneys will profit quite well, so, but I'm sorry.
Nobody's offended, we left them at home.
There is another contracting method that has been used, is seam at risk, and I don't know if y'all talked about that, but you know, that gives you the ability to pick your contractor based on their qualifications, kind of like the way you're selecting your design team. And it's going to cost you, but it's got some advantages because you can get the project man, you know, a lot of construction's personalities, you know, it depends on what superintendent they've got. You know, you can have a great company, if you get the wrong superintendent, the wrong project manager, it could not be fun. So you get the chance to meet those guys and have that part of the selection.
And we interview them and select them.
Absolutely. And there's
Well,
some
I think
advantages to that.
that's part of the advantage we see with the design build is, you know, with doing that. But you made some good points. There's some offsetting concerns as well. So we've just got to make that decision. But y'all are comfortable either way.
Yeah, and as far as ownership goes, you know, the AIA documents and the private sector generally say that the architect's got the rights to those documents, but the state says that we own them. So we work it both ways depending on who the client is.
Well, we just want to make sure that if we go design, build, bridge, that we have control of those documents to the point that we can build our project, obviously.
Yeah.
You know, whether that's ownership or licensing, I'm not sure that matters so much, but because I know a lot of times y'all want to retain ownership because you maybe use components of it somewhere else or something like that.
I don't think that'd be a concern for me. And as a matter of fact, you want the DWG files just to save you some costs when this guy picks it up.
Correct, and we want to make sure in the contract it said that, where we can get everything electronically so he can pick up, whoever can pick up the project and go.
Right.
Okay.
Anything else, gentlemen? Commissioners?
I think you've answered the question, but I wanted to know from the standpoint of utilities and the cost of operation, which is going to be 100 years or more, hopefully. What kind of green, are you using like solar panels or anything like that? Or like at the Steel Memorial Library, we used solar tubes for lighting.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Okay, which, you know, we feel like is a lot better than having a glass roof, for example.
Yep.
And I just want to know if you have experience with that, and if you feel comfortable in your design that it will be energy efficient to the point that, just keep in mind, we've got to pay for these, we got to pay for maintenance, utilities, and administration costs for many years to come.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And more importantly, I mean, the example you're trying to set, I mean, what the offices within this building are pushing the same thing. So, I mean, it's important that the building is backing up what you're doing with the programs, the agricultural programs. So the daylighting is an easy thing to do. We've used those tube lights before. But one of the things that I think is really cool that Jim didn't talk about a whole lot, it's a relatively new system, was this variable refrigerant flow. And what ends up happening is you've got these canisters, and say this building's 2 stories, and say the lower story is against the earth, you know, if it was designed that way. Well, that thing's super insulated, right? So the cooling and heating load of that part's gonna be totally different than the second floor with all the sunlight coming in. Well, this system's got the ability, so you got a cartridge in the second floor and a cartridge in the, if one needs heat and the other one needs cool, they can transfer the stuff between the two. So instead of you wasting it, it can move it around within the building and makes it super efficient. So that's one of the new technologies we'd like to look at that could really be great for you.
Yeah, which helps in areas where you don't have high usage.
That's
high
right.
usage. Sure. So it's sort of like zoning to a certain degree.
Mm-hmm.
I have them in my company. I have, you know, several offices are zoned where they have baffles where you could set the temperature.
Right.
They still use one unit outside. So that's similar to what you're talking about, except on a much higher level. So, okay. Thank you.
Ms. Dollar?
No question.
Any questions? Any closing comments? Or do you have a question? Okay.
Just thanks again for having us.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming, and like I say, I don't know, we won't make our decision today because all the presentations have been excellent. They really have, man. And it's going to be a tough decision. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.